Jake Martinez stepped off the transport shuttle and looked up at the massive structure floating in space before him. Kepler Station stretched for miles in every direction, its gleaming metal surfaces reflecting the light from 3 nearby stars. The Galactic Military Academy was built into the station's center, and Jake could see thousands of windows glowing with activity. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at the station's many ports, their designs as varied as the species that built them. Lisa Bennett walked up beside him, her military duffel bag slung over one shoulder. She had grown up in a Marine family back on Earth and carried herself like someone who knew how to fight. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her green eyes took in everything around them with careful attention. Jake had met her during the long journey from Earth, and they had quickly become friends. "This place is huge," Lisa said, watching as a group of tall, blue-skinned aliens walked past them toward the academy entrance. "I counted at least 15 different species on the way here." Jake nodded and adjusted his own bag. Back home in Texas, he had been a wrestler in high school and was used to being one of the stronger kids around. Here, surrounded by beings that looked like they could tear him apart without effort, he felt small and uncertain. The other human cadets seemed to feel the same way. They stuck together in a small group, speaking quietly among themselves as they made their way through the station. The Academy's main hall was enormous, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows far above their heads. Hundreds of young beings from across the galaxy filled the space, all wearing the same gray cadet uniforms. Jake saw creatures that looked like walking trees, others that seemed to be made of living crystal, and some that reminded him of the praying mantises from Earth, only much larger and walking upright on 2 legs. A loud voice echoed through the hall, speaking in the common galactic language that all cadets were required to learn. "New arrivals, form groups by species, and report to your assigned instructors." The voice belonged to a massive being that stood nearly 8 feet tall, with skin that looked like polished stone and arms as thick as tree trunks. Its eyes glowed, with a dull red light as it surveyed the crowd. The human cadets gathered together, looking around nervously for their instructor. They did not have to wait long. A figure approached them from across the hall, moving with quick, precise steps. Commander Vexahai was a Zephyrian, one of the mantis-like beings Jake had noticed earlier. He stood 7 feet tall on 2 powerful legs, with 4 arms that ended in sharp, claw-like hands. His head was elongated and triangular, with large compound eyes that seemed to see everything at once. A hard, green exoskeleton covered his entire body, making him look like a living weapon. "So," Commander Vexahai said, his voice carrying a harsh, clicking quality that made the human cadet step back instinctively, "these are the humans I have been assigned to train." He walked slowly around their group, his compound eyes studying each of them in turn. How disappointing. Jake felt his face grow hot with anger, but he forced himself to remain silent. Lisa's jaw tightened, but she also said nothing. The other human cadets shifted uncomfortably under the alien's inspection. "I have read your species files," Vexahai continued, stopping in front of the group. "Soft skin, fragile bones, weak muscles, no natural weapons or armor. You have no claws, no fangs, no protective shell. Your planet has low gravity, and your evolution has made you unsuited for real combat." He gestured with one of his 4 arms toward a group of the stone-skinned beings Jake had seen earlier. "Those are Brucars. Their skin can stop projectile weapons, and they can crush steel with their bare hands." The Brukar cadets seemed to puff up with pride at the instructor's words. One of them, larger than the others, looked at the humans with obvious contempt. His name was Thol Ran, and Jake could see the disdain in his glowing red eyes. Vex-High moved his attention to another group. The Veltar are made of living crystal. Energy weapons bounce off them harmlessly, and they can focus light into deadly beams. The crystal beings stood perfectly still, their transparent bodies refracting the hall's lights into rainbow patterns. They showed no emotion at the instructor's praise, but Jake could sense their superiority. "And what do humans bring to this academy?" Vex-High asked, turning back to face them. "Nothing but weakness disguised as determination. Your species only reached space through luck and the charity of others. You have no business training alongside real warriors." Several alien cadets began to make sounds that Jake realized were laughter. The Brukar's laughter sounded like grinding stone, while the Veltar produced a musical chiming noise. Even some of the tree-like beings, who had seemed peaceful, joined in with a rustling sound like wind through leaves. Jake's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he kept his face expressionless. He had learned long ago that showing anger only made bullies worse. Beside him, Lisa's breathing had become carefully controlled, a sign that she was fighting to keep her temper under control. "Your first lesson," Vex-High announced, "is to understand your place in the natural order. Humans are prey animals, not predators. Your role in this galaxy is to serve those stronger than yourselves, not to pretend you are warriors." He pointed toward a door at the far end of the hall. "Report to Training Room 7. We will begin with basic physical conditioning, though I doubt any of you will be able to complete even the simplest exercises." As the human cadets walked across the hall toward their assigned room, Jake could hear whispered comments from the other species. Words like weak, fragile, and useless followed them in multiple languages. Some of the aliens made no effort to hide their amusement at the humans' presence. Training Room 7 was smaller than the main hall, but still large enough to hold several hundred beings. Exercise equipment lined the walls, most of it designed for species much larger and stronger than humans. Obstacle courses stretched across the floor, with barriers that seemed impossibly high and weights that looked far too heavy for human muscles. "Form ranks," Vex-High commanded as they entered the room. The human cadets arranged themselves in neat rows, their military training from Earth showing in their precise movements. The alien instructor walked along their lines, inspecting each cadet with obvious disapproval. "We will start with basic strength assessment," he announced. "Each of you will attempt to lift the standard training weights. When you fail, as you inevitably will, you will understand why humans do not belong in this academy." Jake looked at the weights Vex-High indicated. They were clearly designed for much larger beings, probably weighing several hundred pounds each. Around the room, other species cadets began their own exercises, lifting the weights easily and moving through obstacle courses with natural grace and power. "Martinez," Vex-High called, reading from a tablet in one of his hands. "You will go first." Jake stepped forward, knowing that everyone in the room was watching him. He could feel the weight of their expectations, their certainty that he would fail. The instructor's compound eyes focused on him with what seemed like anticipation, as if Vex-High was looking forward to proving his point about human weakness. As Jake approached the weight, he thought about his home in Texas, about the people who had believed in him enough to send him across the galaxy to this place. He thought about humanity's struggle to find its place among the stars, and about all the others like him who would follow if he succeeded here. The weight was even heavier than it looked, but Jake managed to lift it, his muscles straining with the effort. Around the room, he heard surprised murmurs from some of the alien cadets. Vexhi's expression did not change, but Jake thought he saw a flicker of something in those compound eyes. It was only the beginning. 3 weeks had passed since that first day, and Jake had learned to hate the sound of Commander Vexhi's voice. Every morning brought new humiliation, new ways for the Zephyrian instructor to prove that humans did not belong at the academy. While other species received normal training and fair evaluation, the human cadets faced impossible tasks and constant ridicule. Jake finished his morning run around the station's outer ring, his lungs burning from the effort. The artificial gravity in this section was set higher than Earth normal, making every step feel like he was carrying extra weight. Sweat dripped from his face as he arrived at the training room, where Lisa and the other human cadets were already waiting. "Late again, Martinez," Vexhi announced as Jake entered the room. "Though I suppose we should not expect punctuality from a species that barely learned to walk upright." The alien instructor's 4 arms moved in different directions as he spoke, one holding a training tablet, another pointing at Jake, and the remaining 2 gesturing dismissively. Jake checked the chronometer on the wall. He was actually 2 minutes early, but he had learned not to argue with Vexhi. Any response would only bring more punishment and longer training sessions. The other human cadets looked tired and frustrated, their uniforms stained with sweat from whatever exercise the instructor had been putting them through. "Today, we will practice combat scenarios," Vexhi continued, his compound eyes scanning the group. "Real combat, not the playground games humans are used to." He gestured toward the center of the room, where a large circular platform had been set up. Padding covered the floor, but Jake could see that it was much thinner than what would be used for human training on Earth. Around the edges of the room, cadets from other species had gathered to watch. The Brucars stood together, their stone-like faces showing amusement. The Veltar remained motionless, but their crystalline bodies seemed to pulse with interest. Even the tree-like Sylvans had turned their attention toward the training platform, their branch-like arms rustling softly. "Bennett and Martinez," Vexhi called out, "you will face Cadet Tholran in a demonstration match." The large Brucar stepped forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the human cadets. Tholran stood nearly 8 feet tall and was built like a walking mountain. His skin had the texture and apparent hardness of granite, and his arms were as thick as Jake's entire torso. Lisa looked at Jake with concern in her green eyes. They both knew this was not going to be a fair fight. Tholran outweighed either of them by several hundred pounds, and his natural armor made him nearly invulnerable to any attack they might attempt. This was not training. It was a setup designed to hurt them and prove Vexhi's point about human weakness. "The rules are simple," the instructor explained, though his tone suggested he found the whole situation amusing. "Physical combat only, no weapons. The match ends when one side cannot continue." He paused, looking directly at the human cadets. "Or when the humans break, which should not take long." Jake and Lisa stepped onto the platform together. They had trained together during their journey from Earth and knew each other's fighting styles well. Jake was stronger and had more wrestling experience, while Lisa was faster and had learned hand-to-hand combat from her Marine father. Against a normal human opponent, they would make a good team. Tholran was not a normal human opponent. The Brucar. moved with surprising speed for his size, crossing the platform in 2 long strides. His massive fist swung toward Lisa's head, and she barely managed to duck under the blow. The air displacement from his punch was enough to disturb her hair, and Jake realized that a direct hit would probably kill her. Jake grabbed Thulran's extended arm, trying to use the alien's momentum against him in a wrestling throw. It was like trying to throw a building. The Brukar's arm did not move, and Jake found himself lifted off his feet as Thulran straightened up. With casual strength, the alien cadet tossed Jake across the platform like he weighed nothing. Lisa tried to help by attacking Thulran's legs, hoping to knock him off balance. Her kicks and punches landed solidly, but they had no more effect than raindrops hitting a stone wall. The Brukar's natural armor absorbed the impacts without any sign of damage or discomfort. Thulran backhanded Lisa almost gently, but the force was still enough to send her flying. She hit the padding hard and struggled to get back to her feet, clearly dazed from the impact. Blood ran from her nose, and Jake could see that she was having trouble focusing her eyes. Around the platform, the watching alien cadets made sounds of approval and amusement. To them, this was entertaining rather than the brutal mismatch it actually was. They saw nothing wrong with watching 2 smaller beings get beaten by someone much larger and stronger. "Excellent demonstration, Thulran," Vexhai called out, his voice filled with satisfaction. "This is exactly what I mean when I talk about the natural order. Humans break like glass dolls when faced with real strength." The instructor moved closer to the platform, his forearms gesturing as he spoke to the watching cadets. Jake helped Lisa to her feet, supporting her weight as she swayed unsteadily. Her military training was the only thing keeping her upright, and he could see that she was hurt worse than she was letting on. Blood stained the front of her uniform, and her left arm hung at an odd angle. "Look at them," Vexhai continued, pointing at the 2 human cadets with one of his clawed hands. "Their bones are hollow like those of flying creatures, designed for a weak gravity world. Their skin tears like paper at the slightest touch. Their muscles are nothing but soft tissue that cannot even—" The word stopped abruptly as Jake exploded into motion. Something inside him snapped as he listened to the alien instructor describe humans like they were defective toys rather than people. 3 weeks of humiliation, of watching his friends get hurt, of being treated like they were worthless, came together in a moment of pure rage. Jake moved faster than he had ever moved in his life, covering the distance between himself and Vexhai in 2 quick steps. The Zephyrian's compound eyes widened in surprise as the human cadet appeared in front of him, but he had no time to react. Jake's fist, driven by every muscle in his body and powered by weeks of suppressed anger, connected with the instructor's jaw with a sound like breaking wood. Vexhai's head snapped back violently, and a spray of green blood flew from his mouth. The alien instructor staggered backward, his forearms flailing for balance as his legs buckled beneath him. He crashed to the ground with a heavy thud, his compound eyes unfocused and his jaw hanging at an unnatural angle. The training room fell completely silent. Every cadet, regardless of species, stared at the scene in shock. Thulran stood frozen on the platform, his stone features showing something that might have been surprise. The Veltar's crystalline bodies had stopped pulsing, and even the Sylvans had gone completely still. Jake stood over the fallen instructor, his chest rising and falling rapidly as adrenaline coursed through his system. His right hand was split and bleeding where it had connected with Vexhai's exoskeleton, but he barely noticed the pain. For the first time since arriving at the academy, he felt like he had done something right. Lisa stared at him with wide eyes, her own injuries forgotten in the face of what had just happened. She knew, as did everyone else in the room, that Jake had just destroyed his future at the academy. Striking an instructor was grounds for immediate expulsion and possible criminal charges. Commander Vexhai tried to speak, but only a gurgling sound came from his damaged throat. Green blood continued to flow from his mouth, pooling on the training room floor. His compound eyes focused on Jake with what looked like a mixture of pain and disbelief. Security alarms began to sound throughout the station as automated systems detected the violence. Jake could hear running footsteps in the corridors outside as Academy security rushed to respond to the emergency. In a few moments, they would arrive and take him away, probably back to Earth in disgrace. But for right now, in this moment, Jake did not care about any of that. He had finally shown them that humans were not as weak as they thought. The tribunal chamber was designed to intimidate. High ceilings stretched up into darkness, while curved walls covered in alien script seemed to close in around the central platform where Jake sat alone. 5 beings from different species sat behind a raised bench, their various eyes all focused on him with expressions he could not read. The air recycling system hummed constantly, filling the silence with a low mechanical sound that made him feel even more isolated. Admiral Koreth, the tribunal's leader, was a member of the Etherian species. Her tall, graceful form seemed to glow with its own inner light, and her large, dark eyes held an intelligence that Jake found unsettling. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that human ears were not designed to hear, creating an otherworldly effect that reminded everyone present that this was not a human court. "Cadet Martinez," she began, her words carefully pronounced in the common galactic language. "You stand accused of assault against a superior officer, conduct unbecoming a cadet, and bringing dishonor to your species' representation in this academy." She paused, consulting a tablet that floated beside her chair. "These are serious charges that normally result in immediate expulsion and deportation to your homeworld." Jake kept his back straight and his eyes forward, just as his father had taught him during their conversations about military bearing. He had spent 3 days in a holding cell while the Academy decided what to do with him, and he had used that time to prepare himself for this moment. Whatever happened here, he would face it with dignity. The other tribunal members represented different species and different viewpoints. Commander Thex was a Brukar like Tholran, his stone-like features showing no emotion as he studied the human, Cadet. Dr. Velnith was a crystalline Veltar whose body refracted the chamber's lights into shifting patterns. Captain Orin was a Sylvan, his tree-like form rustling softly even in the still air. The 5th member was another Zephyrian, Admiral Hextar, whose compound eyes never left Jake's face. "However," Admiral Koreth continued, "before we pass judgment, we must hear all evidence related to this incident." She gestured with one graceful hand toward a section of the chamber where witnesses sat waiting. "The tribunal will now hear testimony regarding the events leading up to the assault." Lisa was the first to testify. She walked to the witness platform with her left arm still in a medical support brace, her face pale but determined. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong despite the obvious pain she was experiencing. "Commander Vexhai had been systematically harassing human cadets since our arrival," she stated, looking directly at the tribunal members. "He gave us impossible tasks, graded our performance unfairly, and constantly made remarks about human inferiority." She paused, taking a breath before continuing. "On the day of the incident, he forced Cadet Martinez and myself to fight against Cadet Tholran. knowing that the match was dangerous and unfair. Other human cadets followed Lisa to the witness platform, each telling similar stories of harassment and discrimination. They described training sessions where they were given equipment designed for much larger species, evaluations where perfect performance received failing grades, and constant verbal abuse disguised as instruction. When Thulran was called to testify, Jake expected the Brucar to lie or minimize what had happened. Instead, the massive alien spoke with surprising honesty about the events in the training room. The human cadets showed courage, Thulran admitted, his voice like grinding stone. They faced me despite knowing they could not win. This was not cowardice, as Instructor Vexhai claimed. He paused, his glowing red eyes focusing on Jake. When Martinez struck the instructor, he moved faster than I thought possible for his species. The force of his blow was unexpected. Admiral Hextar leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights. You are saying that a human generated enough force to injure a Zephyrian through our natural exoskeleton? His voice carried the same clicking quality as Vexhai's, but without the contempt. Yes, Thulran replied simply. I have fought many opponents of different species. I know what different beings are capable of. The human should not have been able to cause such damage. The tribunal requested medical testimony next, and Dr. Kalith took the witness platform. The Veltar physician was one of the Academy's senior medical officers, and her crystalline form pulsed with soft light as she accessed her memory files. Commander Vexhai suffered a compound fracture of his lower mandible, damage to his vocal cords, and a severe concussion, she reported in a voice like musical chimes. The force required to cause these injuries would normally require specialized equipment or an attacker of much greater size and strength. She turned her faceted head toward Jake. A human cadet should not have been capable of generating such force with a single blow. Admiral Koreth's ethereal features showed interest. Doctor, have you completed your analysis of human physiology as requested by this tribunal? I have, Kalith replied, her body brightening as she accessed more data. Human beings are far more complex than their appearance suggests. Their muscle density is significantly higher than initial scans indicated, and their bone structure is much stronger than comparable species of their size. She paused, making harmonic sounds that Jake realized were the Veltar equivalent of clearing one's throat. Most interesting, she continued, is their evolutionary background. Humans evolved on a world with higher gravity than most inhabited planets and under constant pressure from large predators. Their bodies are designed for endurance, adaptability, and sudden explosive movement. Her crystalline form shifted to face the tribunal directly. They are persistence hunters, capable of tracking prey across vast distances and wearing it down through superior stamina. Commander Thek spoke for the first time, his stone-like features showing surprise. You are saying that humans are natural predators, not prey animals, as Instructor Vexhai claimed? Precisely, Dr. Kalith confirmed. Their forward-facing eyes, their ability to work in coordinated groups, their tool-making intelligence, and their physical capabilities all mark them as apex predators on their homeworld. She gestured toward Jake with one crystalline appendage. This cadet's response to perceived threat was entirely consistent with predator behavior defending its pack. The tribunal members exchanged glances and made sounds in their various languages that Jake could not understand. He began to realize that something unexpected was happening here. Instead of simply condemning him for his actions, they were actually examining the circumstances that had led to the incident. Video evidence was presented next, showing weeks of training sessions where Vex High had systematically humiliated and endangered the human cadets. The recordings made it clear that the instructor had been deliberately trying to force them out of the academy through harassment and impossible demands. When the evidence phase concluded, Admiral Koreth called for a recess while the tribunal deliberated. Jake was escorted to a waiting room where Lisa and the other human cadets sat in nervous silence. They all knew that their futures depended on what happened in the next few hours. "Whatever they decide," Lisa said quietly, "you did the right thing. In there." Someone had to stand up to him. Jake nodded, but he was not sure he agreed. His moment of anger might have ended all their dreams of serving in the galactic military. Earth had worked hard to gain acceptance in the galactic community, and his actions might have damaged that relationship permanently. 2 hours later, they were called back to the tribunal chamber. Admiral Koreth stood behind the bench, her ethereal form glowing more brightly than before. The other tribunal members flanked her, their various features showing expressions that Jake hoped might be satisfaction rather than anger. "This tribunal finds," she announced, "that while Cadet Martinez's actions were inexcusable, the circumstances that led to them represent a failure of leadership and judgment on the part of Commander Vex High." She paused, looking directly at Jake. "The charges of assault and conduct unbecoming are reduced to striking a superior officer under extreme provocation." Jake felt relief wash over him, but he tried not to show it on his face. "Your sentence," Admiral Koreth continued, "is reduction in rank, extra training duties for 6 months, and a formal reprimand in your service record." She leaned forward slightly. "However, you will remain at the academy and continue your training." The Admiral's next words were directed at the chamber as a whole. "This tribunal also finds that the systematic harassment of human cadets represents a serious violation of academy policy. Commander Vex High will face disciplinary action once he recovers from his injuries." As Jake left the tribunal chamber with his friends, he realized that something fundamental had changed. Word of the incident had spread throughout the academy, and the way other species looked at humans was different now. Instead of contempt or amusement, he saw wariness and a new kind of respect. The humans were no longer seen as weak prey animals. They had become something much more dangerous in the eyes of the galaxy, an unknown quantity. 6 months had passed since the tribunal, and Jake barely recognized the academy anymore. The whispered jokes about human weakness had stopped completely, replaced by cautious respect from most species and obvious fear from others. When human cadets walked through the corridors, other beings stepped aside to give them room. The change was so dramatic that Jake sometimes wondered if they had traded one kind of discrimination for another. The final examination was conducted on Torgan, Prime, a hostile world at the edge of civilized space. The planet's surface was covered in dense jungle that filtered sunlight into an eternal green twilight. Creatures moved through the undergrowth, making sounds that reminded Jake of Earth's prehistoric past, but much louder and more threatening. The air was thick with humidity and carried scents that his human nose found both alien and strangely familiar. Jake's squad consisted of 4 members representing different species. Lisa was there, of course, her confidence restored after months of training under fair instructors. Tholron had requested assignment to their squad, something that had surprised everyone, including Jake himself. The massive Brucar had developed what seemed to be genuine respect for humans after witnessing Jake's explosive capabilities in the training room. The fourth member was Zaranel, an Etherian like Admiral Koreth. Her tall, graceful form seemed to glow with its own inner light, even in the jungle's dim atmosphere. As a member of a psychic species, she could sense the emotions and basic thoughts of other sentient beings, making her invaluable for reconnaissance and communication. Her large, dark eyes missed nothing as they moved through the alien landscape. Their mission was straightforward in concept, but difficult in execution. Somewhere in the jungle was an emergency beacon that they needed to locate and retrieve within 3 standard days. The beacon's signal was being blocked by the planet's natural magnetic field, so they would have to search for it using more primitive methods. Other squads were attempting the same mission in different areas of the planet, and success would be measured not just by completion, but by speed and efficiency. The terrain here is similar to human jungle environments, Lisa observed as they made their way through the dense vegetation. Her voice was quiet, but it carried clearly in the humid air. Earth's tropical regions prepared us for this kind of environment better than most Academy worlds would. Thulran pushed aside a massive fallen tree that blocked their path, his stone-like strength making the task look effortless. Bruker worlds are mostly desert and mountain, he admitted in his grinding voice. This place is as uncomfortable for my people. Zaranel moved like a dancer through the undergrowth, her ethereal form seeming to float rather than walk. I can sense animal minds all around us, she reported, her voice carrying the musical quality of her species. Many are curious about us, but most are maintaining their distance. She paused, her head tilting as she concentrated. There is something else, though. Larger minds, more aggressive. They are moving toward us. Jake held up his hand, and the squad stopped moving. In the distance, he could hear something crashing through the jungle with the force of a small earthquake. Trees were being pushed aside or broken completely, and the sound was getting closer. Whatever was making that noise was large, powerful, and heading directly for their position. Razor spine hunters, Thulran identified, his red eyes scanning the jungle around them. The mission briefing mentioned them. Pack predators, about the size of your earth tigers, but with natural armor and venomous claws. His massive hands clenched into fists as he prepared for battle. 6 of them based on the sound patterns. The first creature burst through the undergrowth like a living missile. Jake's first impression was of teeth and claws and pure aggressive fury. The razor spine hunter was indeed about the size of a tiger, but it moved on 6 legs instead of 4 and was covered in natural armor plates that looked like they could stop most weapons. Spines along its back gave the creature its name, and Jake could see venom dripping from claws that were longer than his fingers. Zaranel tried to use her psychic abilities to confuse the creature, but her musical voice carried notes of frustration as she spoke. It is not working. These are pure predators with simple minds focused only on hunting and killing. I cannot influence them. Thulran charged forward to meet the first hunter, his massive strength allowing him to grapple with the creature despite its natural weapons. His stone-like skin protected him from its claws, but Jake could see that even the Brucar was struggling against the alien predator's speed and ferocity. More hunters were emerging from the jungle, their eyes glowing with hunger as they spotted the squad. Lisa had drawn her training weapon, an energy pistol that was standard equipment for all cadets. Her shots struck the approaching hunters, but seemed to have little effect on their armored hides. The energy beams that would disable most Creatures simply bounced off the razor spine hunter's natural protection. "The weapons are not working," she called out, backing toward a large tree for cover. "Their armor is too thick." Jake found himself moving without conscious thought, his body reacting to the threat with instincts he had not known he possessed. Instead of trying to fight the creatures with weapons that could not penetrate their armor, he used the environment around him. A fallen branch became a lever to knock one hunter off balance. A vine hanging from above became a snare to trip another. When one of the hunters cornered Zaranel against a massive tree trunk, Jake did something that shocked even himself. He grabbed the creature from behind and wrapped his arms around its neck in a chokehold, using his weight and leverage to cut off its air supply. The hunter thrashed wildly, its claws and spines trying to reach him, but Jake held on with grim determination. The creature was stronger than anything he had ever fought, but humans had evolved as endurance hunters. Jake's muscles were designed for sustained effort rather than explosive strength. He could maintain the chokehold longer than the hunter could struggle against it. Slowly, the alien predator's movements became weaker as oxygen deprivation took its toll. Lisa had abandoned her useless energy weapon and was using the jungle itself as her arsenal. She led two hunters into a trap she improvised from fallen logs and loose rocks, using their own momentum against them when they charged. Her movements were fluid and controlled, showing the tactical thinking that had made humans successful predators on their own world. Tholran was holding his own against two hunters at once, his natural strength allowing him to match their physical power. But Jake could see that the Brukhar was being worn down by their superior speed and agility. In an environment like this jungle, raw strength was less important than adaptability and endurance. "Tholran, drive them toward the clearing," Jake called, out, still maintaining his chokehold on the now barely conscious hunter. "We can use the open space to separate them." The Brukhar followed Jake's suggestion, using his massive frame to herd the hunters toward a small clearing where the canopy opened up to let in more light. Once in the open space, the squad was able to work together more effectively. Zaranel used her psychic abilities to sense the creature's movements and warn her teammates of attacks before they happened. Lisa created distractions and obstacles that slowed the hunters down. Jake and Tholran worked together to isolate individual creatures and overwhelm them through teamwork. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. When the last hunter finally collapsed, the squad stood in exhausted silence among the defeated predators. Jake's uniform was torn and stained with his own blood from numerous cuts, but he was alive and relatively uninjured. The same was true for his teammates, though all of them showed signs of the fierce struggle. "That was," Zaranel said slowly, her ethereal form flickering slightly from exhaustion, "not what I expected from this mission." Tholran was staring at Jake with something that might have been amazement in his glowing red eyes. "You fought them with your bare hands," he said in his grinding voice. "No weapons, no armor, just your body against theirs." He paused, looking at the unconscious hunter that Jake had choked into submission. "I have never seen anything like that." Lisa was checking her equipment and assessing their situation with military efficiency. "We still need to find that beacon," she reminded them, "and we have lost several hours dealing with these creatures." But as they resumed their search through the jungle, Jake noticed that his teammates looked at him differently now. The theoretical knowledge that humans were predators had become practical reality during the fight with the razor spine hunters. They had seen him adapt to an impossible situation and find a way to win using nothing but his own body and mind. More importantly, they had seen him work as part of a team, rather than trying to dominate through individual strength. The humans had not tried to replace the other species' abilities, but had instead found ways to complement them and make the entire squad more effective. When they finally located the emergency beacon hidden in the ruins of an ancient structure, Jake realized that the real test had not been about finding a piece of equipment. It had been about proving that humans could work with other species as equals, contributing their own unique. Graduation Day at the Galactic Military Academy was a ceremony that had remained unchanged for over 200 years. Representatives from dozens of worlds gathered in the main auditorium to watch their young people receive commissions as officers in the United Worlds Defense Force. The massive hall was filled with beings of every conceivable shape and size, their various languages creating a constant background murmur that the translation systems worked continuously to process. Jake stood, with his fellow human graduates in the front section reserved for their species. His dress uniform was perfectly pressed, and the insignia on his collar indicated his rank as squad leader, a position he had earned through performance rather than politics. Beside him, Lisa wore the same rank insignia, her leadership abilities having been recognized during their final training exercises. The other human cadets had also performed well, proving that their species belonged in the galactic military community. The ceremony began with traditional music from the founding worlds, followed by speeches from various military leaders. Jake listened politely, but found his attention drawn to the alien cadets scattered throughout the auditorium. Many of them looked at the human section with expressions he had learned to recognize as respect. The contempt and amusement that had greeted their arrival 2 years ago had been replaced by something much more valuable. Admiral Korath took the stage as the keynote speaker, her ethereal form glowing softly in the auditorium's lights. Her voice carried clearly through the vast space as she spoke about duty, honor, and the responsibility that came with military service. Jake had expected a standard graduation speech, but the Admiral's words took an unexpected direction. This year's graduating class is unique, she announced, her musical voice creating harmonics that resonated through the hall. For the first time in Academy history, we are commissioning officers from a species that was completely unknown to us just 5 years ago. Her large dark eyes seemed to focus on the human section. The integration of human cadets into our military structure has taught us valuable lessons about the nature of strength and the danger of assumptions. The auditorium fell silent as all attention focused on the human graduates. Jake felt the weight of hundreds of alien eyes studying them. But this time, the scrutiny did not feel hostile. Instead, it carried a quality of curiosity and recognition that he found oddly comforting. A figure walked onto the stage beside Admiral Korath, and Jake recognized Commander Vexhai despite the changes in the Zephyrian's appearance. The alien, Instructor's jaw had healed, but it remained slightly misshapen where Jake's punch had shattered the bone. When he spoke, his voice carried a different quality than Jake remembered, less harsh and more thoughtful. 2 years ago, Vexhai began, his compound eyes scanning the assembled cadets. I believed I understood the nature of strength and weakness. I thought that physical power and natural weapons were the only measures of a warrior's worth. He paused, touching the scarred area of his jaw with one of his 4 hands. I was taught a painful lesson in the limitations of such thinking. Jake felt uncomfortable being the focus of the speech, but he forced himself to remain at attention as Vexhai continued. I called humans frail, the instructor said. his voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's sound system. I saw their soft skin and lack of natural armor and assumed they were weak. I confused appearance with capability, and I nearly made a terrible mistake that would have cost the galaxy valuable allies. Vexhai gestured toward a large display screen that descended from the ceiling. Images appeared showing various human, military units that had been deployed across the galaxy in the months since the first graduates had entered active service. Jake saw scenes of human soldiers working alongside alien troops in environments ranging from Arctic ice worlds to volcanic mining colonies. What I failed to understand, Vexahai continued, is that humans evolved advantages that are not immediately visible. They are persistence hunters, capable of tracking prey across entire continents without rest. They are pack hunters who coordinate with terrifying efficiency when threatened. Most dangerously, they are tool users who can improvise weapons and solutions from whatever materials are available. The display showed footage from Torgan Prime, recorded by automated systems during the final examination. Jake watched himself and his squad fighting the Razorspine hunters, and he was surprised by how the encounter looked from an outside perspective. The human cadets moved through the jungle like they belonged there, using the environment itself as a weapon against creatures that were physically superior to them. Physical strength is not the only kind of power, Vexhai announced, his damaged voice carrying newfound respect. The ability to adapt, to think quickly under pressure, and to turn any situation to one's advantage are equally valuable in warfare. He looked directly at Jake as he spoke. A blade is soft compared to armor, but that does not make it less deadly. The ceremony continued with the actual graduation proceedings, but Jake found it difficult to concentrate on the formal aspects. He was thinking about how much had changed since that first day when Vexhai had humiliated them in front of the other cadets. The instructor's words today represented more than just an apology. They showed a fundamental shift in how humans were perceived by the galactic community. When his name was called, Jake walked across the stage to receive his commission as a second lieutenant in the United Worlds Defense Force. Admiral Korath presented him with the insignia of his rank, and as she did so, she spoke quietly enough that only he could hear. "Your actions 2 years ago could have ended your career before it began," she said, her ethereal features showing what might have been amusement. "Instead, they taught us something important about the nature of courage and the danger of underestimating others." She paused as she pinned the insignia to his uniform. "The galaxy is a safer place because humans are part of our military forces." After the ceremony, Jake found himself surrounded by alien graduates who wanted to congratulate him and his fellow humans. Many of them expressed interest in serving alongside human units, having heard stories about their effectiveness in difficult situations. The fear and contempt that had once defined their relationships had been replaced by professional respect and genuine curiosity. Tholran approached with several other Brukar graduates, his massive stone-like features showing the closest thing to a smile that his species could manage. "I have requested assignment to the same fleet as your human units," he announced in his grinding voice. "After Torgan Prime, I believe we work well together." Zaranel was nearby, her ethereal form flickering. With what Jake had learned was excitement among her people. "The Etherian Council has approved joint training exercises with human forces," she reported. "They are interested in studying your tactical adaptability and problem-solving methods." As the reception continued, Jake noticed Commander Vexahai standing alone near one of the large windows that looked out onto the stars. The Zephyrian instructor seemed to be watching the celebrations with a mixture of satisfaction and regret. Jake made his way across the room, unsure of what he wanted to say, but knowing that some kind of conversation was necessary. "Commander," he said formally as he approached. Vexahai turned to face him, his compound eyes reflecting the light from the stars outside. "Lieutenant Martinez," he replied, using Jake's new rank. "I suppose you have come to gloat about your vindication." Jake shook his head. "No, sir. I came to say thank you." The alien instructor's mandibles clicked in what Jake had learned was surprise among Zephyrians. "Thank me? For what exactly?" "For pushing us as hard as you did," Jake replied honestly. "You were right that humans needed to prove themselves worthy of being here. You just misjudged what we were capable of." He paused, looking out at the stars. "Without that pressure, we might never have discovered our own potential." Vexahai was silent for a long moment, his four arms moving in subtle patterns that Jake could not interpret. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a quality of respect that had been completely absent during their early encounters. "You know," the instructor said slowly, "in all my years of training cadets, I have never had one thank me for nearly ending their career." His compound eyes focused on Jake with what might have been amusement. "Perhaps that is the most human thing of all, finding gratitude in adversity." As Jake prepared to leave the academy for his first assignment, he reflected on how much had changed since his arrival. The humans were no longer seen as weak prey animals who had stumbled into space through luck. They had earned recognition as valuable allies whose unique abilities complemented those of other species. But more importantly, the galaxy had learned something about the nature of strength itself. Power came in many forms, and the most dangerous. Opponents were often those who looked least threatening, a lesson that Vexahai's broken jaw would remind him of for the rest of his life. The stars outside the academy windows seemed brighter as Jake looked toward his future. Somewhere out there, human officers were serving alongside alien crews, proving every day that strength was not just about size or natural weapons. It was about adaptability, intelligence, and the